On today's show, we'll recap last night's 1-0 overtime loss, the Ottawa Senators falling to the Washington Capitals, and what lessons can be taken.
And we'll preview this weekend with two crucial games up against Eastern Conference teams.
This is Brady Kachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Friday, January 17th, and Pillsy, as far as overtime losses go, and as far as 0-0 games into overtime go, there's a lot to like about the Senators' performance.
Yeah, I mean, in a low scoring game, Ross, it certainly wasn't a low event game like the game up against the New York Islanders. And once again, Leevi Merilainen shines. Ross, when the only shot that beats you is the guy that's going for the most goals ever in NHL history in overtime, you don't feel so bad about that performance. So overall, a great game by pretty much everyone in the Ottawa Senators lineup.
I thought in particular, of course, not like I'm breaking news here, but Leevi Merilainen, the fact, and here's a new angle to a story we've been digging our teeth into for the last 3 weeks now, is how he was able to have not much action in the first period or in the second, but in the third period, this guy was at his absolute best. To me, that's the mental strength, the fortitude, the maturity in a 22-year-old that you don't often see. And I think Leevi Merilainen, he was the reason Ottawa got 2 points in Long Island, and he's the reason they got a point here tonight. I thought they were fine, but they generated 0 goals in the entire game, but in the first 60 minutes. So I thought Merilainen, that power play where Ovechkin had 3 shots on that power play, he was strong there. His lateral movement was great. They tried to beat him with a couple wraparounds as well. They were trying anything to get it past him. So to me, that's the most impressive part. But he also masked a little bit of the offensive deficiencies. How can we get this team to finish a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, now, mind you, this is up against one of the NHL's top teams, the top team in the Eastern Conference. I believe, actually, now they are the top team in the NHL, if I'm not mistaken, with 65 points, tied with the Winnipeg Jets. So, you know, if you're losing a 1-0 game to them, I don't think it should be kind of panic mode on the offense. However, scoring only 2 goals in your last 2 games isn't necessarily a great sign, Ross, but only
one against the goalie, unless you're counting the one that got called back from Gaudette too.
Yeah, fair. But only allowing 1 goal in your last 2 games also isn't that bad. So I do think it is concerning that the offense has dried up a little bit here, especially when we look at Ross. We know this team is riddled with injuries, but it's not their top offensive players that are hurt. Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Tim Stützle, Claude Giroux, Josh Norris, Jake Sanderson, all these guys are healthy. So really there's no easy excuse why this team can't seem to score goals in the last couple of games. But with how good their defense is playing, Ross, I'm not that panicked about it. But we do have 2 really important games, especially tomorrow's game up against the Boston Bruins. And we got to start. You can't rely on Leevi to be the Finnish firewall and stop pretty much everything all the time. You got to give him a little bit of goal support here, and I'm hoping that happens this weekend.
Why not?
It's not a sustainable strategy, Ross, to only score 1 goal on a goalie in 2 games. I know they've got 3 points and 4 possible points in that time, but long term, not sustainable in my opinion.
7 of their last 8 possible points now, 3-0-1 after the win streak ends. The Ottawa Senators still finding ways to collect points in the Eastern Conference standings, which is critical. We'll take a look into it a little deeper in the next segment, but every team that we were laughing at that was losing and making it a kind of a, maybe not a race, but a crawl to a playoff spot, a lot of those teams are now on absolute heaters, and Ottawa's going to have to maintain that pace, and they're coming up against a very rested Boston Bruins team. They haven't played since Tuesday. They don't play tonight, so they'll be ready to go for Hockey Day in Canada, a 3 o'clock game tomorrow against the Boston Bruins. Before we move off of this, Washington Capitals game, and I know we've got the postcast that everyone can go check out for a deeper dive into it. The power play is something I want to ask you about too, because without Thomas Chabot, obviously you're not going to have that second unit snapping the puck around the same way that you have your first. But even the top unit, man, they just don't look like they're getting pucks into those dangerous areas. It feels like they're happy to be around the perimeter, or they'll try for that down low net front play. But there's no pucks on net, crash the net. And I think a big reason of that is Brady Tkachuk being kind of put in a shooter's area or a playmaking area. Is it time to put him back in the net front where he's been so successful in the past?
I don't understand why he was ever moved off that spot, Ross. Like that's Brady's bread and butter, is causing havoc in front of the net, getting tips, getting rebounds. I know a lot of people aren't a fan of kind of his jam play where he just kind of jams it up against the pads, but that does create chaos and rebounds. And you hope that then one of the other players like a Josh Norris or Drake Batherson is kind of lurking in the slot, gets that puck in open space and is able to bury it on a scrambling goaltender. So I do think they should get back to that. I'll say it again. They got to get Norris in his one-timer spot. I mean, that is just insanely obvious to me as an effective way to score goals. You saw Alex Ovechkin. Sure, he didn't score on those plays, but he got set up for a couple of them on the power play, and Leevi stood tall. I thought their best opportunity, Ross, was on the power play was Claude Giroux had a good tip opportunity. I forget who made the pass. It was kind of a cross-ice pass where he snuck in behind the defenseman and got a stick on it, but Logan Thompson was there for the save. But yeah, certainly you want this team to get their power play going. And I think up against the Boston Bruins team that has two of their top defensemen injured, you should have an opportunity to try to at least, Ross, maybe asking for them to score goals on the power play is too much right now, but at least generate more offense and create effective scoring opportunities.
Because Ottawa was at one point the second best power play in the league after the Winnipeg Jets. Since then, it's been brutal. Like they're 24th since I just picked a random date, December 22nd. They're 24th in the league on the power play. Like they've fallen out of the top 10. They're now 11th in the season for power play percentage. And in a game like that, where your goalie's holding it in you and the other guy is playing outrageously good, Ottawa had more expected goals. They were very solid in last night's game. It was actually pretty close. 2.7 for Ottawa and 2.4 expected goals for the Washington Capitals. But Logan Thompson now back-to-back shutouts for him in goal for Washington. And that's where you need your power play when you have that advantage to take what they're giving you and get yourself on the score sheet. It's kind of like almost a mirage in Pittsburgh, right? Like Ottawa explodes for 5 goals in that game, but otherwise 3 against Dallas, which was fairly reasonable. It was enough to win the game. 2 with an empty netter against the New York Islanders. Shut out twice in their previous 2 games against St. Louis and Buffalo. OT lost 2 goals against Detroit too. And like they haven't been able to consistently produce offense basically since that Vancouver game. Like from Edmonton on, they're 4-5-2 record with only 20 goals scored in 11 games. Like that's not going to cut it. You need more than 2 goals a game if you're going to win in this league consistently.
Yeah. And I mean, Ross, I think a big part of that is it starts at the top. Tim Stützle, this team's points leader, he has really slowed down recently. And I mean, he's got his familiar line mates, right? Like he's been consistently playing with Claude Giroux and Adam Gaudette now. So it's not like, shifting line mates and all this different chemistry should have an effect. That's just not the case. I know Tim Stützle, like he's still been good. He's still generating those incredible plays in the offensive zone where he's dangling around defensemen. He's shooting the puck a little bit more, but it is concerning that he's not really leading the charge anymore.
He's leading the league in plays where you're like, wow, how'd he do that? That don't go in the net. I think it was our guy Don in Farhaven that tweeted that out, but you're like, wow, how'd he? Oh.
Yeah.
And every play's ending with like, oh, come on. Like the one in the first period where he danced to get himself in all alone. And then instead of just ripping it 5-hole or trying to do something, he tried to make that extra move to just slide it into an empty net, and it gets broken up. Defender gets his stick on it. I think what's most, I don't know if I'd call it concerning, but maybe ringing the alarm bells that we need to get a new line mate for Tim Stützle. He's only got 1 assist in his last 11 games. 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points in 11 games for Tim Stützle. Like, he was on a 100-point pace earlier this year, and it's just cooled right off. So maybe they're waiting for David Perron. That's what I'd imagine they're doing, is waiting for David Perron to come back and seeing if that can jolt that line and have a line of Stützle, Perron, and Giroux. That's my guess at what's going to happen. But David Perron wasn't back last night, and it was still Adam Gaudette there, and Gaudette's playing perfectly fine. I'm not saying to take him out of the lineup, but when your superstar player has 1 assist in 11 games and 4 points, you got to look at finding different ways to get him going. No better time to get going than tomorrow. And Martian said with Brady Tkachuk being on a 4 or 5 now game pointless streak, he's waiting until after that Boston game to say anything about it. It's 5 straight games without a point for Brady Tkachuk. He had a golden look in the third period. Great opportunity. Good save from Thompson. But I'm watching Brady tomorrow. No spoilers. We'll get to our locked on player later. But the offense needs to come from those guys. And my hot take of Drake Batherson being a point per game looked so good until it didn't. It's kind of dried up now. He's at 39 points in 44 games. He did have 3-game point streak during the win streak, but I'd like to see one of those guys pop off for a 3 or 4 point night, right? Like get the juju back that's getting you guys the success when you have had it this year. On the other side, the wild card race. Holy smokes. Meaningful games. We'll get into those and a preview of Boston on Saturday and then in New Jersey on Sunday. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. Ross, they're bumping it up to $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for those winnings. You're seeing those green numbers in your account right away. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. I love looking at the profit boost. They often have 30% profit boost. I love the Gronk anytime touchdown scorer, 30% profit boost. So if you're excited about the NFL playoffs, you got to go to FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. It's our pub in the heart of the Glebe. Go visit them at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. They've got live music every Saturday night at the GLEBE Central Pub. So head there this Saturday, no cover. Just go enjoy the programming at the GCP. Tomorrow, it's the Jeff Ricks Band taking the stage. The upcoming acts are all found on GlebeCentralPub.com. They've got all sorts of specials from open night mics to different food and drink specials. And if you get your tickets to the Sens Shuttle, make sure that you say that Locked On Senators sent you. $17 round trip to and from the CTC. The bus leaves an hour and 15 minutes before the game, and then 15 minutes after it will take you right back to the pub. You can get tickets for tomorrow's game against the Boston Bruins. That's a great bus to be on because you're getting back to the pub at prime time. They've also got tickets available for the Saturday game against the Toronto Maple Leafs next weekend and Thursday, January 30th against the Washington Capitals. Lots of great action coming up at the GCP. So head to where the vibes are free. That's our bar in the heart of the Glebe at 779 Bank Street and let them know that Locked On Senators sent you. All right, Pillsy. So the Ottawa Senators are 3-0-1 in their last 4 games. They are sitting 1 spot out of the final wild card position. But if you sort it by points percentage, they're hanging on to that second wild card spot, tied with the Montreal Canadiens. But Ottawa does have the tiebreaker with more regulation wins and more regulation and overtime wins. Ottawa and Columbus are the only 2 teams in the wild card race with a plus goal differential. What are your thoughts when you open the standings and see just how clumped up all these teams are?
It's exciting, Ross, and it's fun to finally have a season where we're in the mix and we're talking about the Senators being one of those teams that could snatch a wild card spot. I think still the biggest thing that always gets me is I cannot believe how good the Columbus Blue Jackets are doing this season. And they're on a 6-game winning streak, Ross. Like, it's crazy. So shout out to the Blue Jackets. You got to hope that they fall off eventually so that the Ottawa Senators can take their spot. Or in April when they play them twice. Those are 3 times in April.
One might be late March, but all 3 of their games against the Blue Jackets are late in the season. They play them for the first time. I'm going to find this right now because I find it so interesting. The first game against Columbus is March 29th, and then they play them back-to-back games. April 6th in Ottawa, April 8th in Columbus. That's actually Ottawa's only road game in the last 9 games of the season.
Yeah, so those games could be very crucial.
Could you imagine if those 2 back, like home and home series that could determine
that decides it?
Wow.
Yeah, and then it's, I hate to do it, but you got to give credit to the Montreal Canadiens with an identical record to the Ottawa Senators, 22-18-4.
And I think we're not going to get off the rails here and start complimenting the Habs too much, but I will say, have you seen the teams they've beaten during this stretch?
Yeah, they are really getting their young guys performing. Like obviously Lane Hudson's doing well, and then that goalie is it Dobes? Dobesh, my apologies.
Dude, he's their Merilainen, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what's so cool about Ottawa and Montreal vaulting up the standings right now is they're both doing it with young goalies. Merilainen's 22, and I believe Dobesh is 23, if not 24. But yeah, since December 28th, the Habs have won 9 games. They're 9-1-1 in their last 11 games. Am I reading that right? Like that seems outrageous.
I mean,
their
last
wins,
10, they're 8-1-1, so that makes sense.
There you go. So wins over Florida, Tampa, Vegas on the road, Colorado on the road, Washington on the road, Dallas on the road. Like those are tough barns to go into and get wins. So I mean, as much as we can clown on them and dislike them as interprovincial, but obviously the closest rival in the NHL geographically, you got to tip your hat. They're playing some unreal hockey. Now, are they sustainable? We'll find out, but you have to. They're on the map. They're in the race. They have
the same record as the Sens, Ross. We can't pretend that we're that much above them here, and it's going to be interesting because that's another team, Ross, that the Sens have only played the one time, second game of the season. So they're going to have some major influential battles as the season goes on too.
And it's pretty interesting. I just turned on Tankathon. Don't worry, not for spins.
Whoa.
They also have a feature called Strength of Schedule, the points percentage of all your teams remaining combined. And Ottawa and Montreal are 1 spot apart in their strength of schedule. So
this is going to come right down to the wire. Oh, my God.
Now, the team with the hardest strength of schedule remaining is the Detroit Red Wings, who are also in the race. They got another big win last night. They're 8-2, in their last 10. And 8-1 under the new coach, or 7-1, if I'm not mistaken? No, 8-1, because they had the 7-game win streak snapped.
Yep.
And then 8-1, but then they lost the first game. So McClellan's had them for 10 games. They're 8-2. And then you can't discount Philadelphia, and to a more extent, I think the New York Rangers all of a sudden have won 6 of 8. Everyone in the race is starting to heat up, except for the New York Islanders, who are falling off, and the Buffalo Sabres. Like those Buffalo and New York Islanders. I'm putting the done chain on those guys. Shout out to PMT, but those guys are done. They're out of the race. Would you declare any other team out of the race? Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are who I'm looking at for there.
No, I mean, Pittsburgh,
2 wins in their last 10.
And they just sent down their number 1 goalie, sent him through waivers. So they're not exactly looking great here, Ross, but it's too early to count Sidney Crosby out, in my opinion. So I'm not putting the dumb chain on them just yet. But funny enough, Ross, we're talking about how all these teams in the wild card race are doing really well and picking up points. the teams that are in the division spots have kind of been struggling here. Like, we look at our next opponent, who we'll get into, the Boston Bruins, are 3-6-1 with some major injuries that we already talked about. And then the other opponent this weekend for the Ottawa Senators, the New Jersey Devils, in their last 10, they're 3-4-3. So, like, it's not that crazy that some of these teams that are really battling for wild card spots, if the divisional leaders slip off, those division spots could become available.
Yeah, I mean, Florida and Tampa, second and third in the Atlantic, are 4-5-1 in their last 10 games. Ottawa's only 3 points back of Tampa. But as we turn this conversation to look ahead to Saturday, tomorrow, and would you look at that? The Detroit Red Wings are playing in Tampa against the Lightning. Ooh. So are you rooting for Detroit? Like, it's so tough because it's like, are you just going to bend the knee and say Tampa's in no matter what? Let's let them win and keep pushing Detroit down? Or,
I think so.
Or are you going to try to make everybody below you win and everybody above you lose? I guess it really depends on how confident you are that Ottawa's going to win their games.
Yeah, I think, Ross, for me, if I'm the Senators, don't worry so much about seeding and positioning. Just get in, right? Like, because I think this team can match up against some of those other top teams.
Well, we just saw them, playoff preview last night against Washington.
That's what I mean, right? Like, it's not like in a 7-game series, I wouldn't be shaking in my boots if the Ottawa Senators matched up against the Washington Capitals.
Just Carolina. Keep us away from Carolina.
I don't talk about how my predictions against the Carolina Hurricanes go anymore, Ross. There's who knows what will happen in those games.
Yeah, you learned your lesson there. Elsewhere in the NHL tomorrow, another game where it's like, can they both lose? The Columbus Blue Jackets are visiting the New York Rangers, right? Like, you don't want the Rangers to stay hot and start vaulting up the standings, but Columbus is right ahead of you, and Columbus has been brutal on the road. So do you want them to stay lacking confidence winning on the road?
I want the Columbus Blue Jackets to win that game, Ross. Because again, if I'm in the playoffs, and I don't know how this would happen, but if the Ottawa Senators were matched up against the Columbus Blue Jackets, no offense to them. Again, I've already complimented them. So the Blue Jackets fans, if you're listening, don't fire that cannon at me just yet. By the way, those Stadium Series jerseys for the Columbus Blue Jackets,
sick.
That's got to be their best jersey ever, and that should be their number one jersey. No offense to the Red Wings, but just.
It's hard with an original
words
6
on a jersey. Like, come on, I don't know. That doesn't do it for me. But whatever.
What, like wings, like Sens? Imagine that.
Yeah, that doesn't do it for me. But I forgot my train of thought here. Yeah,
you want to play Columbus in the Blue in the play?
Whoa! I didn't say that. All I said is I wouldn't be scared if they were the opponent that I was matched up against versus the New York Rangers. Like, I don't know necessarily if that's a team I want to match up, just because it's
Where
just
do you want to take a trip though, Pilsy?
Yeah. Certainly New York City is a little more interesting than Columbus. But if Shesterkin figures it out in a 7-game series, he could steal that series for a team. So that's where my concern would be.
Very fair. We got the Columbus Blue Jackets in New York take on the Rangers. We've got Pittsburgh in Washington. That's a classic matchup. Ovi versus Crosby. We got Leafs versus Habs. So plug your nose on that one, but we are rooting hard for the Toronto Maple Leafs in that.
Not that hard, though. We're rooting for them.
But it all starts at 3:00. Senators and Bruins. Game day preview is next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, Pilsy, we have breaking news.
Whoa.
Linus Ullmark is in gear and taking shots before practice with goalie coach Justin Peters.
Oh, man, that is such good news. I mean, with Leevi Merilainen having his coming out party, it's not like that crazy, but it still is really nice. Like, I was saying it in the postcast. By the way, that was my first kind of hanging around in the chat postcast experience. The chat is an absolute blast. So that was fun for me to do. But I mentioned that like a Linus and Leevi tandem just has such a nice ring to it. And I would just feel so confident in that because obviously guys, Linus Ullmark is still the number one goalie of this franchise, but you wouldn't feel the need to ride him as much as you felt the need before when he was winning all those games and Forsberg was the backup. Like, you could split the games between Leevi and Linus a little bit more, and I think you would want to, Ross, because you wouldn't want Leevi just sitting there getting cold, waiting for back-to-back games to get his time in. So I think that would be a tandem that would really bring this team a lot of confidence and would have long-term success.
Well, it's two goalies that have given them a lot of success. In their last 13 combined starts, Linus Ullmark and Leevi Merilainen are 11-0-2. 11-0-2. And we had people in the comments say, well, 12-0-1 would have been better. Yeah, I get it. Ovechkin on a bobbling puck just got one past him in overtime. But Forsberg's 0-6-1, or 1-6-1 in his last 8 starts, I believe. I could be wrong.
Oh, yeah. And Ross, I bet the save percentage and goals against average in those 13 games would be sparkling. Hey, LSP stats department is on it. Check back later on Locked On Senators. Sens Central. Love it.
On Twitter. We've also got a very optional skate today for the Ottawa Senators, so we're going with the lineup from yesterday. Michael Amadio was back. He played just a few minutes in that game. He was very much, I think, just getting his feet back wet, but that's good because hopefully he'll be able to hit the ground running here in the game against the Boston Bruins tomorrow afternoon. Top line, we expect it to be Tim Stützle with Claude Giroux and Adam Gaudette. Josh Norris centering Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson. Shane Pinto between Nick Cousins and Ridley Gregg. And then Ostapchuk with Highmore and Amadio. On the back end, we're hoping Thomas Chabot is back. I've put him in the lineup here. They said he was day-to-day and missed that game. Although, man, Donovan Sabrango had a great game himself, for sure. There's nothing that you would say, oh, we need to get him out of lineup. But when you can put Thomas Chabot back in there, you certainly do. Nick Jensen at his right. Then you got Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub and Tyler Klevin, who again was in a top 4 role last night and I thought handled himself really well. We've got him back with Nicholas Matin Paolo Pilsy. I know it's a back-to-back. We're not going to worry about Sunday. Levy's playing tomorrow, right? Like, this is too big of a game to put Forsberg in for.
100%, Ross. I think that is the obvious choice. Now, I know people don't like this, and everybody just wants to say Levy's winning, just keep going, and Forsberg sucks right now. But I think you gotta give Levy
Sunday
a break on Sunday. Yeah, I know
unless Ullmark's back. Just kidding. I don't think he's gonna be back till next week. But there's big games next week too. You're in Boston next Thursday. Like, if that's the game that Ullmark comes back for, I'd be happy. You're also playing the Rangers on Tuesday. Like, next week, I mean, we're in meaningful games. I just love it. But with that said, like, no. I feel like Sunday is a perfect Forsberg game. And hey, he might surprise you. He had one of his better games this season against the New Jersey Devils at home, albeit a loss, but he played well in that game.
Yeah, and that's fair. Because look, like, Levy will have played 5 games in 8 days. That is a lot. I don't care how young you are, how cool and chill you are, how great of shape you are. That's a lot of games for a goalie to be playing. So I think you have to give him a break on Sunday, even if it means signing some random goalie and putting him in because you don't trust Forsberg. That's fine. But Levy needs that break. Yeah. Hey, we'll call Ian Mendez. We'll get those waivers signed and we'll figure that out. Maybe one of us to play.
Hey, instead of signing a contract, we sign a waiver. It's like, wait, aren't we getting paid for this? Yeah, you're getting paid in nothing.
Hey,
opportunity.
Ross, I would take the eBug deal, but don't they get it? Is it like $1,000 and they get to keep the jersey or something like that?
You get a meal.
Yeah, okay. I'll take a free meal and get to keep a Pillar 39 jersey. That is more than enough payment for me.
Okay, that's sick. Who's your locked on player to watch tomorrow? This is a big game coming up.
I'm going to go with Drake Batherson, Ross.
Okay,
we talked about it earlier. He was on a 3-game point streak. Hard to get points when your team doesn't score. So that was snapped last night against Washington Capitals. But if this team's going to get going, Ross, I think Batherson's going to be a part of that. I think you mainly want Timmy and Brady to be the driving force here. But Batherson is the ultimate kind of supporting role guy for those top offensive guys. And I think he's kind of the key cog that moves the gears, that gets the offense going. So for me, I'm going to be locked on to number 19, Drake Batherson.
Love that. I'm going with Brady Tkachuk. I already teased it earlier. He had the game-winning goal in overtime in Boston in the first meeting between these two teams. he comes to play when the time needs it most. And with no points in 5 games, I'm sure he's going to be gripping the stick ready to go and lead his team to a big win tomorrow. So I'll be locked on to the captain for his offensive attributes. I actually think he's been playing a really well-rounded game in the last 5 days. He had 5 hits, 5 shots last night, and he's also, I think, more responsible defensively. I saw him hounding back on the back check last night. Like, these are all winning habits, but you also pay him to score goals. That's what the money's for. So let's get Brady Tkachuk off the schneid here against the team in his dad's hometown, Boston. Obviously, the game's in Ottawa, but if you go look at Brady Tkachuk's first ever Instagram post, you'll get a real laugh out of that. All right, let's take a look at the Boston Bruins, how we expect them to line up. They're coming off a 6-4 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday, so that's 3 full days off for the Boston Bruins, and we expect their lineup to look as such. Pavel Zacha at center between Morgan Geekie and David Pasternak. You've got Elias Lindholm between Brad Marchand and Vinny Lettieri. You got Matthew Poitras with Trent Frederick and Charlie Coyle, and John Beecher with Cole Koepke and Justin Brazeau. On the back end, Nikita Zadorov with Brandon Carlo, Mason Lohrei with Parker Wotherspoon, and you've got Callahan and Andrew Peeke on the third pair. Jeremy Swayman, we expect to start in goal. I really think he's going to start in goal, Pillsy. I don't think they're going to go with Korpisalo against Ottawa, a revenge game. I don't think they're going to do it.
No, I think, Ross, we can sit here and we can guarantee that it's going to be Jeremy Swayman. There really is no chance that we're wrong on this, and it's Korpisalo starting.
We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to be wrong.
I'm with you. Yeah, we if there's one thing people know about LOSP, it's we always have 100% accuracy with our lineups and when we declare starting goaltenders.
Yeah, so really looking forward to seeing Swayman in goal for the Boston Bruins. Hey, if you want to go see a quick laugh, watch the intro of our show the day after the home opener in 2022. That was an all-time boots on the ground episode at the Casa Levitan in Alta Vista. But with this game, it's not really so much who's in the lineup for the Boston Bruins, it's who's out. No Mark Kastelik, no Charlie McAvoy, and no Hampus Lindholm. That back end is literally losing its top pair. That's your top pair out of the lineup. How do they respond to that?
Ross, is this the weakest Boston Bruins lineup we've seen in the last decade? I would say so.
The decor the last decade has always had either Chara or McAvoy in it. So just off the top, there's no top end talent in that decor. I don't care what they paid Nikita Zadorov. He is a elite 4th defenseman on a championship winning team.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and they would probably agree with that. Like, that's kind of the role he was brought in to do. So for me, Ross, my lookout player is number 88, David Pasternak. He
kills Ottawa.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have those stats in front of me, so maybe while I'm chatting, you can get his stats against Ottawa. But he is I was going to say the bread and butter, but I'll say the butter and pasta of this team, because he leads this team with 48 points in 46 games. Brad Marchand is next with 35 points, and then it dips down to 24 for Pavel Zacha. So, if you can contain David Pasternak, especially on the power play, I think you have a really good shot at shutting down this team offensively. And look, Ross, their last 2 games, they've beaten the Florida teams. We talked about how Tampa Bay and Florida kind of have been faltering lately. Against Tampa Bay, 6-2 win. He had a goal, 2 assists. Against the Florida Panthers, 4-3 win. He had 2 goals and assists. So, and then you look at the games that they're losing, and he's not really, well, I guess some of them he's putting up points, but the last 2 games they lost up against Tampa and Edmonton, no points, and they only scored 1 goal in both of those games. So, really, this offense runs through pasta. So, key to victory for me, Ross, is just shut down 88, and if they beat you other ways, let them have it. Just shut down number 88.
I love that. I completely agree with you. And you look at, there's some players who are playing for something to prove. You look at Trent Frederick in a contract year. You look at Matthew Poitras, who's been elite in the AHL, but hasn't really had opportunity or success in the NHL. I'm going to stick with the top end guys, though. I'm not going to get too cute with this. I thought about going with Swayman just to double down on the guarantee that he starts instead of Korpisalo, but I'll go with Brad Marchand. I mean, when a team struggles, you look to the leaders to get them out of it. and Brad Marchand and all the off-ice drama with the fake reports that were coming out of the radio that Pasternak and Marchand don't get along and all that. He came and squashed that. You know, as a good leader, he's going to be looking at his own numbers and saying, man, I'm better than a 35-point player at this stage in the season, and he's a dash on the year. Like, I'm looking at Brad Marchand that if Boston's going to re-stabilize their season, Marchand's going to be a big reason why. So it's about locking up Brad Marchand in tomorrow's game. And historically in his career against the Ottawa Senators, Brad Marchand I don't think he's killed them the same way that Ottawa or that Pasternak has killed them in the past. Marchand's got 38 points in 53 games against the Senators. And that leads me perfectly into Pasta, because Pasta's got one more point against Ottawa in only 29 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's crazy what he does. That is surprising to me, Ross, that Marchand is, I don't want to say like low like that, but certainly lower than I had anticipated. So, yeah, if you shut down those two guys, I'm not really concerned about anyone else on this Boston Bruins lineup, to be honest.
And we will see it all tomorrow at 3:00. We will have the postcast for you after tomorrow's game. Thank you for liking, watching, listening, and subscribing to the show. It means a whole lot to us here on LOSP. It's been another great week with Claire Hanna, with Ian Mendez, and 7 out of 8 points ain't bad. Pillsy, any final thoughts from you on today's show?
Final thoughts for me, I'm just looking at the Belleville Senators weekend that's coming up ahead, and they have only one game this weekend, Ross, as they played Wednesday, a loss to the Lehigh Valley Phantom.
One of their games on Saturday got postponed because the concrete under the ice needed repair in Mahogany Arena. I forget what city. Wilkes-Barre?
Yeah, maybe that's Wilkes-Barre. Yeah, so that's a good point. That's probably why. Their next 3 games, Ross, are up against the Hershey Bears. Ironically, they just played the Washington Capitals. The Hershey Bears are a good AHL team. So Friday, tonight, up against the Hershey Bears at the Giant Center. But like David Bell, you got to give him credit. He has not had the lineups and the players that he thought he would have with all the injuries in Ottawa. So let's see him find a way to get these boys fired up and get a big win tonight.
For more, check us out on social media at Sens Central on Twitter. For today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.